Jerry Garcia has been a great guitar teacher for me. So I was pretty late to the Grateful Dead world. Before I got into them, I was mostly into classic rock and the blues and indie rock. It was like Led Zeppelin, B.B. King, and Radiohead. And I'd heard some of the Dead before. It was mostly their album versions, and it's not that I disliked it; it just didn't resonate with me. And then finally, I heard the famous Cornell concert live, their live version of Cornell. And it just, the veil kind of lifted, and I finally got the Grateful Dead. And I went down this crazy rabbit hole of just listening to nothing but live Grateful Dead for years. I think one of the reasons why I got into it is there's just so much to the Grateful Dead music, You have, Bob Weir playing these wild inversion chords, Phil's playing incredible bass lines, and then you had Jerry doing these incredible solos. He's really a master of the guitar. He's got the whole thing figured out. And at the time as a guitarist, I had no idea what he was doing and how he was doing it. I was much more used to, the blues and classic rock and indie rock, where a lot of it was more key-based soloing. So since then, I've gone down a rabbit hole, and there's tons of good lessons on YouTube. What I learned and what I wish I would have known from the start is really three things to understand Jerry Garcia as a guitar player. And I'm going to go over the last one in detail for this video. The three things are: you got to know chord tone bass soloing, you got to know your modes, and then you got to know some sequences. So chord tone bass soloing, it's almost more of a jazz thing. So instead of playing just in the key of a song, so instead of saying, oh, this is just in G, I'm just going to play G pentatonic or G major over the whole thing, and I'm just going to kind of feel it, which is still good, and I still do that. It's more about knowing what notes and what chords are behind you and bringing those to the forefront of your solo. So if you were playing a song and it was just, G to C, you could play just G pentatonic over the whole thing. But what chord tone bass solo is you would play G over the G. And then when the C chord comes, you're going to play C. And if you're doing it right, you should be able to do it without a backing track. You should be able to know. You should almost be able to hear the chords underneath it without them being there. But that's a whole nother lesson. So the second thing to know is modes. Modes are very helpful because what I feel like they do is they give you kind of the roadmap for the whole fretboard. So like Fire on the Mountain, it's just B to A, B major, A. So the key bass solo, and some people, you could just get away just playing B major. And then the chord tone bass solo was that you would... you could play be playing that. So mode bass soloing would be knowing that the B is going to be your 5 and the A is going to be your 4. And so the 1 would be E major, and that's your parent key. So you could play the whole E major scale over the whole song, and all those would work. And what that does is it gives you a place to run from chord tones to chord tones. So But that's also another lesson. So knowing chord tones and knowing your modes will give you plenty of, that's almost like a life's work. You can spend your whole life just working on those things. And that's how Jerry was able to play so uniquely and so different and improvise every night. Because he's not you know, he's got his own licks, but he's not like a lick player. He's not just jumping from lick to lick. He's connecting those chord tones through modes or scales or chromatics in his own way every night. And how he gets to each tone or where he wants to go is going to change in the moment, or how he's feeling. And that's what's exciting about his playing too. You know, is that every night and every performance is a little different. And he's able to do it using those two things instead of just, you know, just doing licks. So that's why the Grateful Dead's so fun to play. It's because you don't have to be Jerry Garcia. You know, you can take those two things, and you can spend your lifetime trying just doing that. And when you take concepts like that, it also allows you to be you. You know, since you're not playing somebody else's lick and you're not chasing exactly what they're doing, you know, some of your own stuff is going to come out. You'll eventually find your own sound that way. And now the third thing, sequences, are a great way to sound like Jerry. And they're fun to do. And it's a great way to practice scales. You know, instead of just doing boring scale runs, you can do sequences. So sequences are just a pattern. And it's just a pattern you repeat. It's like a math thing. I used to know, you know, kind of that pentatonic one that I would use, you know, in a lot more kind of like rock type of bass songs. But what Jerry did, he's got many of them. Like you can make a lesson on like 10 sequences that Jerry used. But a common one that Jerry did was sequences of 4. And this took me forever to, like, once I figured this out, I was like, oh, that's how he's floating around, you know, because he'll move through the scales quickly, but it's not like it still sounds like a scale, but it's like he's floating through. He's like flying through it, you know. And I think that's how he gets it, is with the sequences. So we'll say we're playing Fire in the Mountain, you know, B to A, B Mixolydian. And as I mentioned earlier, that's the parent key is E major. So you have that whole E major scale. But we're going to look at it through the lens of B, because the song is in B Mixolydian. So you have your C-shaped B chord. And this is a good one to start on because I feel like it's a very ergonomic pattern. So what his sequence is, so it's a sequence of 4. So he's going, you know, we're in B Mixolydian. So it's a sequence of 4. So he's taking 4 notes, starting at the highest note. And then he moves down from the highest note. And then he moves down to the next one in the scale. And you can do that as far as you want. You know, we're going to go up and down with this, but eventually you can get going diagonally or horizontally. And going up would be the same thing. You know, if we're starting here on B, so you hit every note in the scale. You're just doing it in sequences of 4, which makes the scale feel a lot longer, and it doesn't feel quite as kind of gives like a little, it's like you're dancing, you know, type of thing. A good way to practice to get it under your fingers, you know, you can just do this stuff on the couch. Either you could just run the whole scale, you know, just like we did. Sometimes I'll just do groups of 4 over and over just to get my fingers used to it. You get it. Sometimes after you do that, it makes it easier to do the whole thing. So if you put a backing track on, you can go from playing chord tones to then doing the sequence work.